Hey guys, Jay here. In this video, I'll be explaining what variables are and how to work with them in Python. If you're just tuning into the series, you're welcome to watch my introduction video, where I talk about this series and what it includes. Whether you want to watch the introduction or not, I would highly recommend that you watch the videos in order. I'll include links down in the video description. First, let's talk about what a variable is. A variable is how a program stores data in the computer. Variables can store text or numbers, true or false values, or even more complicated objects and lists. To put it simply, variables have a name and a value. The name refers to a particular place in memory that is used to store and retrieve the data value. Let's start with a few rules for Python variable names. A variable name must start with a letter or an underscore. It cannot start with a number. The name can contain numbers, but it cannot start with one. Letters, numbers, and the underscore are the only characters that can be used in Python variable names. And last but not least, variable names are case sensitive. Name is different from name is different from name. Variable names can be short or long. You could choose to store a user's name in a variable named in, or a variable named name, or a variable named username. Usually using a longer name makes the code easier to read because the variable name is more descriptive, but using a shorter variable name can be quicker to write and can be used in some instances. In addition to single word variables, there are a few accepted ways to type multi-word variables. Although you could simply type a multi-word variable in one word, as in this example of library card number, although this is perfectly valid variable name, it can be difficult to read, so there are a few ways to make the variable name easier to read. Pascal case is where the first letter of each word is capitalized, as seen here. Camel case is similar to Pascal case, but the first letter of the first word isn't capitalized, as seen here. Snake case is where each word is separated by an underscore, as seen here. Each of these variable names is equally valid, however, some are more readable than others. The important thing is that you choose one standard for naming variables and stick to it throughout your code. Otherwise, the code gets really jumbled and confusing, and it's really hard to remember variable names. In my opinion, snake case is easiest to read, so that is what I'll be using for multi-word variables in this series. So that's it for naming variables. The variable name will be followed by a single equal sign. This is called the assignment operator, and this assigns the value on the right of the equal sign into the variable name on the left. The second and more important part of a variable is the data. There are a few data types that are used in Python. There are string variables, which hold a string of text, numbers, and punctuation. Strings are surrounded by quotes or double quotes. Here are some examples of strings. A website URL would be a string, as in the example https learnjmartmedia.com. A name would be a string, for example, John Doe. A video title would be a string. 2 of 10 all about variables, learn Python for the absolute beginner. In addition to strings, chars are a data type that is similar to a string, but only contain one character. There are also data types that store numbers. There are floating point numbers, which are numbers with a decimal point that is not at the end of the number. We say that the decimal point moves from place to place. We say it floats, which is why it's called a floating point numbers. And then there are integers. Integers are whole numbers such as 1, 2, 3, and 4. -1 and 0 would also be integers. Integers and floats can both be used to perform mathematical calculations. For example, you might use a float or an integer to store the price of a retail item or the number of people who live in a building. You could also use a string to store these types of data, but if you use an integer or a float, then we can perform mathematical calculations on them, whereas if we were using a string, we couldn't necessarily just add them together. Floats and integers are both typed without quotes around them. If you were to surround an int with quotes, then the computer would interpret that as a string. The final variable type we'll be discussing in this video is the Boolean or bool. A Boolean holds either a true or false value. An example of a Boolean value in our everyday life would be an on-off light switch. The light is either on, which would be true, or off, which would be false. There's no in between. It's either on or off, true or false. Booleans can also be assigned by using the comparison operators, which we will talk about in the 6th video. An example of this would be 1 equals 2. The double equals is a comparison operator. It compares the value on the left and the value on the right. If the statement is true, so if the data on the left is equal to the data on the right, then the statement would return a Boolean value of true. If the left and right side of the statement are not equal, then the statement returns a Boolean value of false. We'll get more into comparison operators and Boolean values later on in this series. Let's go ahead and make a new Python script to play around with the variables. I'll call mine lesson_2.py. Let's go ahead and type out some variables just for practice. Let's create a name variable to store our name. For the variable name, we can type name, and then type a space, then an equal sign, then another space, and since we're storing our name, we will use the string data type. Type 2 quotes, and inside the quotes, type your name. We can view this variable by typing print, open parentheses, and then the variable name, and then a closing parentheses. Now the computer reads this variable as the value that is stored inside it, and it prints out your name to the console when you run the script. If we change the string that is stored inside the name variable and rerun the script, then we can see that the output changes even though we didn't change anything in the print statement. Well, that's it for this video. In the next video, I will show you how to accept input from the user and output stuff back to the user. Again, if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe so you'll be notified when I post the next one. If you found the video helpful, please give it a like so that more people will see it. I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. Have a great day. I'm out.